Question. Hi Kim, the Ascended Masters mentioned that those people who are spiritually open most likely made a divine plan prior to their most recent incarnation, with the guidance of their teachers and I am presence. What if there's a person who was in such a low state of consciousness prior to the current embodiment that he or she was not willing to accept any help or guidance from their teachers or I am presence, therefore has no divine plan, but he or she gets inspired by someone who is truly spiritual? If this person has a genuine change of heart, excuse me, and makes an effort, however small this effort is, to align with higher principles, will the Ascended Masters be assigned to him or her, and will the conscious you, along with the I am presence, be able to improvise and create a divine plan for the remainder of the time this person has left in his current embodiment? Well, I mean, the short answer is yes, of course. You see, I mean, you can see spiritual people who take one or two approaches. And one is that there are some people that aren't ready to wake up, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then the other approach is everything is predestined. So everything that happens is meant to happen. And it's all preordained, and it's not, therefore you don't have free will. But the reality is that people always have free will and the potential to change, and nothing is set in stone. So yes, there are certainly, well, let's put it this way. There are people that are in such a low state of consciousness that when they leave one embodiment, they go to, for example, the emotional level, where there's the lowest level is what's called the astral plane, and where there is conditions that that are reminiscent of the visions of hell that people have had. And if people are in this very low, very self-centered victim consciousness, when they're not willing to take responsibility for themselves, they cannot consciously, in between embodiments, work with the Ascended Masters, because they're simply not able to consider that they could do anything differently. I mean, the real, you could say the real turning point for people is that you come to a point where you decide, I can't project out anymore, that it's always, the problem is always out there. What can I change? And then you're willing to look at yourself. They talk about with addicts, that addicts, they keep spiraling down. They make the things, their situation worse and worse, alienate people, get into debt, whatever, until they, as they say, hit rock bottom. But hitting rock bottom really is you come to that point where you can't project out. You can't find excuses anymore. You need to start saying, what can I change? That's really the turning point. So if a person hasn't reached that turning point before it leaves one embodiment, it can be in between embodiments until its karma pulls it back into the next lifetime. In other words, I talked about a school of hard knocks, and the school of hard knocks can also be said to be more of an unconscious process, where, in other words, a being isn't able to decide what do I want to do in my next lifetime? Where would I like to embody? What would I like to learn? How can I grow? So the person is just pulled back by the karma it has made. So let's say, for example, you have been a criminal in one lifetime, and you have been fighting with other criminals, and you have killed some of them, or maybe they even kill you, and that's why you go out of embodiment. So there you have a very physical karma with a certain group of people. And if you're not willing to raise your consciousness at all, you're going to reincarnate in your next lifetime with the same people. And you already have this, you're born with this animosity towards each other. So you're very likely to get in conflict again and make it even worse. And this is how the school of hard knocks unfortunately works. That people, it's just like the addict, they keep boxing themselves in until they finally can't move. And then they say, oh, could I change something by looking at myself instead of always looking out. So let's take a person who is in this state of mind. They went out of embodiment, they spent some time in the emotional level, they come back into embodiment with the same group of people. But now they finally come to a point where they say, let me look at myself. And at that point, immediately, the Ascended Masters will be assigned, a certain Ascended Master will be assigned to work with that person. And of course, the I Am Presence is always there. I mean, you could say that the I Am Presence is like a sun. It is always shining. But when people have boxed themselves in by these karmic circumstances, it's as if they have locked themselves into a prison, a closed box with no windows. The sun is shining on the building, but there's no light getting through to the person. So when a person gets to that point where it's willing to look at itself, it's like it scratches a little hole. And now a ray of sun from the I Am Presence can shine through. And then from there on, it really is a matter of what does the person do with that? Because the law, the spiritual law is that the Master said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And this means that whenever the person has turned around and is willing to look at itself, it must be presented with some kind of teaching that can help it go to the next level. It can be an outer teaching in the form of a book or an outer teacher, but it can also be from within, and will be also from within. The question is how conscious the person is of it. But now we have, what we then activate is Jesus' parable about the talents, where 3 servants were given talents by their master, who then went away. Master comes back and requires or asks the people, what have you done with the talents? And 2 multiplied them, 1 buried them in the ground. So if the person, after having this turnaround, is willing to use what it received to multiply, to do something with it, to become more conscious of itself, it will of course receive more help. If it isn't, well then we are back into the school of hard knocks. And so it's very possible that a person, even late in life, could make some kind of effort. That means that instead of going back into this astral plane that's basically a dead end, it could now go to a higher level after this embodiment, where it can receive help to heal, to expand its awareness, so it can have a much better embodiment next time, where it isn't completely trapped in karmic circumstances. I mean, you see people all over the world who are born into these situations where they are surrounded by people and there's just conflict after conflict. I mean, let's take an example. Somebody is born in the Middle East, and they are growing up in a group of people who is in conflict with another tribe, another nation, or it can be the Jews and the Palestinians, as you see going on right now. And they are brought up to hate the other group. They are brought up to predict it's the other group's fault. So they are really brought up to be in conflict with this other group of people. And they may end up going into some kind of violence that ends up getting them killed at a young age. So you could say that person was so boxed in by these outer karmic circumstances that basically its whole life was predestined in a sense. But if the person decides not to respond to violence with violence, if the person is just a little bit open, then this could set the person on a different track, so that in its next lifetime, it's not so boxed in by these outer karmic circumstances. And therefore, it can get on a track where it can gradually start taking more and more responsibility for itself, and it will of course receive help. And if it multiplies what it's given, it can get itself on a positive track. And it could be just one decision in a lifetime that sets a person on a different track. So, you know, it's like this again. We have the traditional religions that are always talking about, it's like you have a God up there who wants to punish people, right? Just wants to send them to hell. which is so ironic when you consider that these people often claim to be Christians. And what does Jesus say? Fear not, little flock, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. The reality is that God and the ascended masters want people to grow, but they want people to grow out of their own free will. So until people make that choice, I'm willing to look at myself, well, there's not much the ascended masters can do, right? And so as soon as they make that choice, immediately something is given. If they multiply it, more is given, and this positive spiral starts.